folks. We're here to provide you with some accurate information. Again, social media is always a buzz. I mean, you guys have, you're always very, very busy on social media, and that certainly keeps Cayman Mall Road busy. Sometimes our job and our responsibility is to ensure that, not sometimes, all the time really, is to ensure that accurate information is put into the public domain. So we can have discussions on all sorts of issues. But if we don't start from the foundation of having the most accurate information available, then it really makes little sense, because I think we go down a lot of rabbit holes, chasing discussions and chasing issues that in some instances are non-issue because the facts just don't support it being an issue. And in other instances, we've just completely missed the mark. So, we have an obligation to the people of the Cayman Islands to make sure that we're bringing you as much information as possible. So this morning, of course, I woke up to a number of social media posts, things that we have been chasing up on. And one that we received that was quite interesting was quite a negative post about Foster's supermarket, and the fact that, I'll show you guys the post, the fact that this house in West Bay, which a lot of us know right before you get to the four-way stop as a traditional Caymanian style home, is being demolished, is what they said. So this post from a Mr. Let me just get his name here. But in any event, he claims that this house is actually going to be demolished. And of course, that was shocking to see that any Caymanian style house would be demolished. But he went as far as saying, Mr. Mike Hoffman on his Facebook page, Mike went as far as saying that he was blaming Foster's supermarket, actually tagged them in the post, for the demolition of this home. And he couldn't believe that the Central Planning Authority met on Wednesday and actually made this decision. So apparently there's quite a bit more to the story than meets the eye. First of all, we reached out to Mr. Woody Foster. As you guys know, if you pay attention to the CMR platform, one thing we can say about Woody with certainty is he's always willing to answer questions, and he's always willing to speak to the people directly on any issues that, involves Foster's directly or even indirectly. So we reached out to Mr. Woody, and he's agreed to speak directly to this and to give us some background information, which I think is really critical to understand what has transpired here. So let's go ahead and bring Woody Foster, CEO of Foster's, into the conversation. Good afternoon, Woody. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
Afternoon. Welcome.
So give us an idea. I mean, like I just mentioned, this traditional Cayman style home has been there for many, many years. A lot of people, I think, love seeing them kind of spread out throughout the community. And this is one of the few, I think, that might be left in the district of West Bay and perhaps elsewhere around the island. But give us the backdrop about what is this really all about here? What's really happening?
Well, we made a planning application to expand the store. We bought that land, 15 years ago or something. I don't remember how long ago it is now, but when the opportunity came up for us to buy the land, we purchased it with the intention of, at some point in time, expanding the store.
Now, just remind our viewers, because it seems like forever, but when did Foster's actually purchase? It used to be Republic's grocery store, and then Foster's purchased it. When did that happen? When did that store become Foster's?
It was either 98 or 99.
Okay.
So it was quite a while ago. Mr. Lewin Parsons and his family owned it at the time, because he had expanded it to that location he was down by the four-way stop originally, and then he moved to that location.
Right.
And he was running it for a while, and then we purchased it from Mr. Lewin and his family. But it was either 98 or 99, sometime around there. So when the land came up next to it, we purchased it in the event that we needed it for expansion. So it was always contemplated. Obviously, we wouldn't buy the piece of land if we didn't need it for expansion or some other reason. So that would be known, obviously, to the people who sold it to us and of course planning and others.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2008, we opened up our expanded location. We went from 8,000 square feet when Mr. Lewin had it to just around 33,000 square feet now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so we always try to have around us enough room for expansion in the event that we need it.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't find ourselves in a situation like we have at the airport store where there's nowhere left to expand to. And now any expansion now means moving or just building another store. So we try not to leave ourselves in that type of a situation.
Mm-hmm.
So it takes forward planning. And I think at some point in this conversation, we should talk about forward planning as a country. So back when we did our expansion in 2008, the road that was because we've actually bought 3 pieces of land. The original piece from Mr. Lewin bought another piece where there was another old Caymanian house on. They took the house at that time and moved it to another piece of property. So there was at one point it was actually 4 pieces. Okay. Now there's 3. So now we're growing yet again, which will now include the piece that is under discussion now. But at that time, back in 2008, the road that was there, because that's a part of the contention with this application as well, is how can Foster's build its store over a government road? So we haven't. Back then, we asked for the road to be moved to the far west of the property line that we had at that time. Planning and Lands agreed to that. We have the documentation for that, which we have since shared with them, because for whatever reason it didn't happen and they didn't have the documentation to say that it needed to be done. So we have now rectified that and given them that documentation.
So this is, let me just understand what you just said to me, because this is so incredibly peculiar, I suppose, but maybe it happens all the time and the general public doesn't know. So you have an actual agreement with the National Roads Authority and Planning, and that is a legal document. And those entities, those government entities, can't put their hands on that legal document. And they
I shouldn't say that, because I don't want I don't want to say something that I'm not quite sure on.
Yes.
All I know is that we legitimately move the road being the driveway, if you will. So where it is currently, so if you come into the Republic store through our main driveway, not the one on the east side, but the one on the west side, that has moved, because it was further east when we first had the store. Okay. So we moved it west back in 2008 with planning and NRA approval. So and that is now, unfortunately, if you look at the lands and survey map now, it's showing that it's underneath the store, but it shouldn't be. It should be where it's actually located, right?
Right.
So that's what I'm trying to say. So I don't know what happened, why it didn't get changed on their system. But something snafu, shall we call it? So that part of the opposition, if you will, of this application from Department of Environment should be taken care of, as it's just a technical mistake.
Right. Okay.
So when we made that move, we not only moved the road, but the right of way going from the main West Bay Road going down towards Boggy Sand. We asked to move that as well. And that is part of the opposition as well, known as the bridge. And so for everyone's knowledge, the bridge is not a bridge at all. Because back in the day, the bridge was there because it was basically felled trees that went over, say, the marshland so that they could traverse from the road to the beach. So there was no bridge as such, other than a bunch of logs that were just felled so that people could walk over those. So back in 2008, it was discussed with planning that we didn't need to replace the bridge because there was nothing there to replace. But if we could just work with the National Trust to put a sign there that signifies that it was there, we did that. So if you go to the property right now, you'll see the sign there by our main entrance talking about the bridge.
Okay.
So
the bridge is essentially a pathway?
Well, not really. The right of way is there.
Right.
Where it goes over the swampy part.
Mm-hmm.
There's fell logs so that you could walk across the marsh area on your way to the beach. I remember now you're going back decades, so it hasn't been used in forever, but
Okay.
historically it's important. And of course, it now then filters into the conversation about all of the beach access being lost, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there's that whole conversation as well.
Mm-hmm.
So if you include those two components to where there's the beach access and the right of ways, it used to connect from the beach all the way to, let's just call it, the main road.
Right.
But
Okay.
as we have expanded, we've pushed the right of way west, so they don't quite line up anymore, but they're both still there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay.
what we would like to do with this application is, now that we're moving it west yet again, is actually put in something more than simply just a sign. If we could reenact, if you will, a
Mm-hmm.
bridge and make it a part of the house that is going to remain, the Bothwell's house that is there next to, adjacent to our land. So when cruise ships ever come back to Cayman, whenever that may be, and the buses stop by the old Cayman house to show the tourists what old Cayman house used to look like,
Mm-hmm.
they could now also go down the side of the west side of our property and not just redesign, but actually kind of go across an area that would have been known as the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Which then brings us to the house.
Right.
So when we first bought the house, or sorry, when we first bought the land with the house, and I don't remember what year that was, we tried, because we knew that at some point in time we were going to expand either the store or put in shops or something. Again, that's the reason why we bought the land in the first place. So rather than get rid of the house, we tried to do what the previous property owner did, which was to move the house to another location. We reached out to a few people, two of them being one DART and one was the National Trust. And DART at the time had no use for the house. And again, I don't want there to be any disparaging remarks about DART for that. They didn't have a use for it. So they declined. We spoke with the National Trust and they told us two things. One is that there is very little wattle and daub left in the house at this point in time. So from that perspective, it didn't have much value. The value in it is the oldness of it.
Mm-hmm.
And the oldness of things take a lot of money to maintain.
Right.
And they have the funds to maintain it. So while they said thank you, they declined. So the two people that we thought would be able to do something with it declined. So we're then left with this house that we don't really have a need for.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to just leave it there and let it be in the community. It was very dilapidated at the time and just got more dilapidated over time.
Mm-hmm.
So about 3 years ago, a friend of mine was actually looking for a place for her helper to stay. And we'll get into that story. That's a whole nother story. So he said, well, yeah, we're happy to rent you this house, but rather than rent it to you, we'll give it to you for $1. Mm-hmm. And you fix it up at your cost. And there's no rent. And basically it'll be a wash because it'll take roughly 3 years to pay back what you've put in. We don't anticipate doing anything with that location for probably 3 to 5 years. So we should be fine. And if it goes over the 3 years, we're not going to start charging rent. We'll just continue on until we're ready to expand.
Right.
Which then brings us to today, and we're ready to go. So the lady has moved out, and we're ready to proceed.
Okay.
In the meantime, a local individual who lives in Eastern Districts said he would like to move the house. We were like, perfect. This is what we want to do in the first place. Didn't think anybody was willing to do that. Well, somebody then came behind him and said they would like to do the same thing. However, he got there first. So we let them know that if it falls through, then that's something else maybe we can think about. But so far, to date, that individual is very interested in moving the house, has spoken to a contractor. The contractor said, yes, they could move it. And then they wouldn't move it as it is. Two things need to happen. The back piece of the property is basically of no value. because that was an add-on to the old original house. And so there's
Mm.
concrete and all kinds of plywood and all kinds of weird medians in there that are of no real value, no historical value.
Okay.
So
Right.
this is, that's that back piece there.
That back piece, yes.
The house, right. So
Yep.
what you would have to do with the original house is that they would have to break it apart and then put it on a flatbed and move it out east. So it couldn't go in its original form. But they said it can be done. It's been done many times, including, as I said, the house that was next to it 15 years ago. They did it as well. So they're in the process of working through that with a local contractor to get that up to East End. So that would be the plan. We do have a plan B if for whatever reason that falls through, which it doesn't look like it will. It looks like it'll happen. If for whatever reason it doesn't, we have a plan B. So at this point, there shouldn't be a reason to demolish it. It should find a new resting home somewhere. And the person who is taking it has the wherewithal to maintain it, take good care of it, love it, if you will. It just won't be in that location, which to my mind then takes us to, well, why should we be in this situation in the first place? I believe this is a good opportunity, and I think we can use Foster's as a developer. And when I say developer, just, we plan on growing with the community, which means that as the community continues to grow, we're going to need to put more stores, or our competitors will, or somebody will. So if we use this situation as a poster child for Cayman's development and what we don't want to see, which is losing our old landmarks and our old buildings, rather than waiting for us to put in an application and then criticize us, which is 10 or 20 years too late for the criticism, we should start looking on these situations, or looking on the pieces of property that we want to save, and put a plan in place for them now. Rather than waiting on the application. It is far too late once the application process has gone in. Now,
and we've seen this, to your point, Woody, we've seen this before, even with the property in Cayman Brac, where they were doing the development of the facility for the aircrafts. I forget the name of the company now, but we saw that situation as well, where the National Trust, in fact, had an opportunity to purchase or acquire, or whatever their processes are, to indicate that this land was so incredibly valuable that it needed to be protected, and it had been just sitting there for a considerable amount of time, and that simply didn't happen. And then you wait until a business person acquires the land, and then there's this kickback in the community that, oh, this business person has spent millions of dollars in property, and now you can't do anything with it. And I take the point, because even at that time when we were having the discussion about that project with Mr. Miles from that entity, I find it really peculiar. I'm like, why are we not, it can't be that difficult. There's not that much land.
I think the difficulty one is vision. Vision is never easy. It's always easy to look backwards and say, well, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z, right? It's never very easy to look forward and say, hey, we should do this, because one, it takes vision and it takes money, and both aren't necessarily in big supply when it comes to these types of things. If you look at the National Trust, I think the National Trust is doing possibly get myself in trouble with some of my developer friends, but I think they're doing an amazing job in terms of going out and getting funding to buy up the central mangrove wetland, so that doesn't fall prey to development. So that's being proactive. They're doing something about it. They have things in place to where people can buy land and put it in the name of trusts and whatnot. I think that's really good. How can we take a program like that and use that to protect our national treasures, if you will, whether it's these houses or pieces of land or whatever the case may be? Let's identify them and don't let them get sold. Let's speak to people who have the wherewithal to do those types of things. Now, there aren't that many of those individuals who can be so philanthropic that they can buy land and do nothing with it. But if we put a program together that actually contemplates that and is proactive about that, even if you get half of it, well, still you've saved half. But if
Right.
all we're going to do is sit back and be armchair quarterbacks and wait until the game is ended and then pick everybody apart for being wrong,
Mm,
where's the value in that? I don't see that. And that's not really because I am a sustainable Cayman person. I am not a develop, make hay while the sun shines kind of guy.
mm,
So of course I could be criticized now. Well, why are you tearing down a
mm,
beautiful little place of over 8 parking spaces? Well, it's not as simple as that. Yes, the beautiful house sits on a piece of paper, sits on 8 parking spaces, but it's in the middle of the parking lot. I mean, if somebody was actually living in there and we left it there, or it was a museum or whatever, how are you going to walk out the front door into a parking lot with moving vehicles?
mm,
It doesn't really make sense, and we would have to completely not do our expansion, which I'm not sure that that's right either, right? So I mean, we are planning into the future. I mean, if you drive around West Bay, the construction in West Bay is incredible. West Bay is growing again. It's been leaps and bounds. So we are of the opinion that we need to be ahead of the curve and put things in place to improve our store, because we haven't done anything major with the store since 2008. So we're actually behind in terms of when we should put money back into the store. So we are doing that now with the future in mind. And if we're anticipating more customers due to the population growing and the community growing, parking is under pressure now. So, the old song of tear down paradise to put up a parking lot is very appropriate right now. But how do you manage growth if you don't do that? Unless you're going to go up. And going up is very expensive. If you look at Caymanian Bay, I mean, obviously, we have a store at Caymanian Bay, and we spent an inordinate amount of time in the planning process of that store. And we spent a great deal of time in the very beginning with the planning of a parking structure that went up at Caymanian Bay. And it was deemed too expensive. Now, if DART tells you that it's too expensive, it's too expensive.
Right.
So it's not really that practical to go up, and nobody likes to go up. So how many people do you know tell you that there's no parking at Caymanian Bay? And if you speak to the powers that be at Caymanian Bay, they will tell you there's lots of parking at Caymanian Bay. Because nobody wants to go up. So if you don't go up, you got to go out. Going out is tearing down paradise to put up a parking lot. It is what it is. I mean, Cayman is developing, whether we like it or not. So we have to address that. So if that's true, and it's going to happen whether we like it or not, why don't we be more proactive about choosing the sites that we believe are important and making sure that they are protected? Now, one will say, well, this area that you're in is a historic site and it is protected. Then we shouldn't be allowed to buy it and expand if you knew that that's what it was. So
what were the details of if we just go back to this post that's kind of kicked off this discussion, Woody, we see that there's some indication that your actual application, it says that it was on the agenda to approval to destroy the traditional Caymanian home. So we know that that isn't true now.
No. I mean, I can't, in all honesty, say that it isn't true. We did not believe we had anybody who wanted to take the house, and we didn't have any use for it. So we are thankful that through the process, 2 people have come forward and said, I would like to take the house. So I can't say that. I would be lying if I said, no, that's a mistake, that didn't happen. That wouldn't be truthful. So I got to take whatever licks I need to take over that. And that's fair enough. But through the process has worked in the scenarios that it got out to the right heirs, and 2 people have come forward and said, I would like to take the house.
So that has happened since Wednesday.
No. That
okay.
happened probably 5 or 6 weeks ago. That happened quite a while ago, or possibly even longer.
So, I mean, the implication here is that on Wednesday you were still saying to planning.
No.
So that technically isn't correct.
No, that technically is not correct. We made that change quite a while ago. I guess the original write-up for the application should have been changed, and then just didn't. So I suppose I would have saved myself a lot of headache if that part of it had been changed, but it didn't. So I have to take again my licks on that.
And so to also clarify what we're reading here, this is not an historic overlay zone. I mean, I don't even know what a historic overlay zone is, but this where this house is, that's not zoned as a historic zone.
I I couldn't hand on heart tell you whether it is or whether it isn't. Some of the I've met with three amazing, lovely ladies, and somebody from the National Trust who's also lovely, so don't leave her out. About 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I believe it might be. I am not sure what that is, to be completely honest with you. So I'm a little bit dumb there on what a historical zone is.
Mm-hmm.
But it may be. But again, what does that mean? Just saying something, but it doesn't have any rules against what you do with the property, then
Mm-hmm.
again, doesn't really make much sense.
Mm-hmm.
There needs to have some substance to it. Otherwise, we leave ourselves in the position of being where we are now,
Right.
where we're saying, well, you're allowed to develop, just don't do it because it's emotional.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make much sense, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. And as a business owner, I mean, obviously what you're saying is, if business owners, if developers knew that there was this sort of longer term development plan, right, where they could look at a piece of property and say, right, well, this property is not going to be available for purchase and expansion because it has been designated in a particular way by whether it's National Trust, the government, whatever, then that will give you some ability to plan accordingly and to make
Right.
better expansion decisions and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I hope that clarifies the position. I think, a lot of people believe that this was a brand new application. You're actually saying that this dates back to 2008, which is a considerable amount of time. And it's just now a situation that you're actually ready to implement your expansion
Yep.
for the parking lot, the expansion of the parking lot.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if there's any more questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Yeah.
I know we can't make everybody happy. So I'm sure this conversation won't, I guess those who don't want the house to move at all, it won't make those folks happy. But I mean, we feel we have to do what we need to do for the taking care of the community from what we do, which is to sell food, and to be there as a full service supermarket. And so unfortunately, this is where development has met history or historic, and we're at an impasse, and something has to give. So we would like to think that the compromise is the house is going to another place on Cayman where it'll be preserved and taken care of, and development for the community is allowed to happen. But I would really like to put a plug into any government heirs who may hear this, in that we need a proper living, breathing development plan that contemplates these things. We've been talking about it for eons.
Yes.
And if we could stop paying lip service to it and actually put it in place, I think it would be an amazing thing.
All right. Well, we'll see if the PAC government's the one to do it. Thank you so much, Woody. Appreciate you joining us today. And again, just adding a little bit of clarity, folks, to the situation. Woody, enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks. You too. Bye.
All right, folks. So you've heard it there. Mr. Woody Foster from Foster's, CEO there at Foster Supermarket, just giving a little bit of background information. Sure, most of you didn't know this application was something that was approved from 13 years ago, in fact. And it's now just a matter of tweaking it because they're actually preparing in real time to make their necessary expansions at the location there in West Bay. So again, I hope that we've added at least an element of clarity and additional information to the discussion that was being had on social media. I think it's, we're very passionate about a lot of different things in this community, and I love that passion about us. I myself have gotten up in arms about a lot of different issues, but as you always know, it's important to be passionate with the accurate and correct information. I've been receiving a lot of comments about how people feel about this, and some of them not the nicest comments in the world, and everybody's entitled to those feelings and those comments. But I think that if you're doing so with accuracy, then that is really where your comments can be so much more meaningful. We need a developmental plan. This government is keen on sustainability. The premier himself ran on a platform of putting the environment first and balancing development. We're not saying no development at all, but we're saying that there has to be a balance, and we have to know that the environment comes first, because if there is no environment, then there really is no sustainability for any of us going forward. Having said that, business owners, I think, in all fairness to them, need to have some degree of certainty. Certainty in business. That's when you sit down and you make a business plan, folks. If you don't know what the factors are, when you do your SWOT analysis and all this fantastic stuff, if you don't know what the factors are that will impact your plans for your business, whether it's 5 years, 10 years, 25 years and beyond, then you're going to really be making decisions in the blind. And the one thing that most business owners do not like is uncertainty. They like to have a fairly good idea of what the future holds, as much as any of us can predict. So there you have it. Again, big thanks to Mr. Woody Foster. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to this interview as well. And we hope that you like and share it with your friends, so again, we can spread accurate information across the Cayman Islands. This is Sandy reporting from Cayman Mall Road.